Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things Giants football, all things college football. I'm Sal, back from my hiatus with my co-host Monty. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Sal? Had a great weekend of college football, man.
Oh yeah, I was out of town, but I came back just in time to watch Monday's games, and it was everything I was hoping for. Defensive battle from the first game, Michigan, Alabama, everything you could have wanted from those defenses, and then just like that, just the dude. We got to talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Michael Penix Jr. What else can we say about this guy, dude? He put on a freaking show. What, like, you know how I feel about him. I think he's awesome. I think he's right up there with the best of them in this class. But you know, you've had a little bit more reservation about him. But tell me what your thoughts were watching that game.
He
Did
had
it change your
pretty
view on him at all, or?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it doesn't necessarily change my view, but he answered some questions, at least for that one game, about some stuff I had concerns with him with. Like he played really well, getting moved off his spot and making his throw. He showed a little bit more athleticism than I've seen from him before. And I mean, look, like accuracy hasn't been a huge concern for me with him, but there was a little bit, but he could be as accurate as he could be almost all game. He had like maybe a couple touch passes that he just put a little bit too much juice on that game, but for the most part, he was putting that on the money, man. He saved his best game of the season, like quite literally his best game of the season for the biggest stage. So, big props, and there's a lot of things that people will be thinking about with Michael Penix, but he's gonna make it harder and harder putting up performances like this for people to deny him.
Something to be said about somebody who does that on the main stage, right? All the lights shining, everything on the line, and you do that. That tells you a little bit of something about who the dude is. So I'm here to bang the drum for Michael Penix Jr. This kid has not gotten as much love as he deserves for what he does, and I think I was as happy as anybody to see what he was doing. Wherever he ends up, maybe it's the Giants, but wherever he ends up, I'm going to be rooting for this kid for the rest of his career because I'm so like happy for him and what he did. Um, the other game. Oh, before we go to that, the pass. I have to talk about this. The pass. I think it was the touchdown. I think it was the poke in the back of the end zone,
Mhm.
where the announcers got it wrong, and they were. I don't know if you remember where they said,
Yeah, yeah, I know what
"Oh,
you're
they were like the safeties were late in communication, and that allowed Penix the time to like hit the back of the end zone." Folks, if you remember our quarterback one episode, I said to you, I think the most impressive thing about Michael Penix Jr. is the way he holds safeties with his eyes until the absolute last second. And you had a criticism that you didn't think he threw with enough anticipation. And I think we kind of came to the conclusion that maybe that's just maybe that's his game. Like he doesn't throw with anticipation because he trusts that his arm is such a howitzer and he just holds safeties like a tactician with his eyes and then he slings it. And that's what you saw in that play. Like you could see him holding the deep safety for as long as possible. And at the last second, he turns and snaps his wrist and fires it right between the two safeties to the back of the end zone. Like that was, I saw that touchdown. And I was like, that's everything we saw about this kid. Just so impressive.
Yeah, man, and I think that is what we talked about and what we kinda came to. I mean, ultimately, we'll see if he can continue to get away with kind of those later throws in the NFL because, he has such a good arm, he can get away with it now. But I do agree. I think like, you can tell it's something where he's kinda doing it on purpose. He's trying to play the defense and, they alluded to it on the broadcast, just not correctly. But, yeah, you see safeties get looked off by him constantly, and he continues to just use his absolute cannon of an arm to squeeze these balls in.
Incredible stuff. We should talk about the other game real quick before we hop into what we're doing. We got a special episode for you guys, special series of episodes. We'll get into that in a second. But the Michigan Alabama game, man, a lot of people went into it saying, "Oh, JJ McCarthy is going to have to show whatever in this game," and I kept telling people like these are probably the two best defenses in college football. This is going to be a defensive battle, and
Yep.
that's what it was. It was. I mean, there were several draftable players on. Those are two NFL defenses going toe to toe with each other. Um,
100%.
I think McCarthy got off to a shaky start with the pick that he got lucky wasn't a pick, or he
Yep.
just that was just terrible. It was a bad play. And I
Yep.
think he had at times struggled against that Alabama offense. And I think it's fair to say that he didn't do it himself a ton of favors through most of the game in terms of the perception that he has in the public. He made some pretty incredible throws off platform on the run. He showed his legs. He featured all the stuff he could do. I don't think he had like a spectacular performance. But what I will say to his detractors is he was down a touchdown with about 5 minutes to go against an Alabama defense that had not given up anything all game and had just in the last game they played held down a Georgia team that hadn't lost a football game in almost 3 years. And he walked them down, with his legs, with his arm, with Blake Corum. Of course, Blake Corum was incredible, but he walked them down as the quarterback down the field to score that game time touchdown. And I think you saw glimpses of what he could do. Now, I don't know where the kid's going to go in the draft, but personally, my view on him has not changed. I think he is an incredibly talented young man. I think there's a lot of untapped talent there still. He's young, he's developing. He has a lot of college film, so you can make the argument that maybe he is what he is. I don't believe that what he does in that Michigan offense is necessarily what he's exactly going to do in the at the NFL level, because I do think the Michigan offense is a very uniquely conservative offense. And I know people will say, well, why are they so conservative if he's not, if he's so good? If he was better, they would throw more. I can't really, there's no way to like retort that with evidence, but I will just say that that's just the way they run their offense. And when you have Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in that offensive line, and you watch Jim Harbaugh, this is how he runs offenses. This is he wants it this way. So I don't think he hurt his stock. I don't think he helped his stock. I think he's sort of still there. I think ultimately he does have. I think for most people, he's probably got like a mid first round grade. What are your takes on this?
Yeah, man, I ended up looking at it as a net positive, but again, it wasn't CJ Stroud versus Georgia that really kind of opened people's eyes up. It wasn't that type of game. But look, I'd like to point out that a lot of people going into this game were like, Nick Saban's going to put JJ McCarthy in hell. Have you
Yeah,
seen Nick Saban's record when he has 30 plus days to prepare for a team? He's 9-0. They absolutely dominate teams on defense when they have that time preparation. They came in and JJ McCarthy threw 3 touchdown passes and he had like 250 total yards. Like, look, I'm not going to sit here and say like this was his cleanest game he's ever played. Not all his passes were on the money. He had that interception, but it didn't look like outside of that first play, it did not look like the stage was too big for him. I felt like he made the plays when they mattered. They shouldn't have even been in that situation between special teams mistakes. There's a couple
yeah.
crucial drops.
That should have been a
But
close game. That shouldn't have been a close game. Michigan dominated on defense so much, and their run game was having their way that they should have won that game by 2 touchdowns. The special teams miscues really hurt them a lot in that in that second half and in the first half actually.
And and I'll say they consistently kept putting the ball in JJ McCarthy's hands when it mattered. Obviously, in overtime, they handed off twice to Blake Corum, and he just put it in the end zone. But on third downs, like they consistently and have done this all year, put the ball in JJ McCarthy's hand. Whether he made the pass, whether he dumped it off to Blake Corum and he made a play, whether JJ McCarthy took off of his own legs, all all those things happened depended on the drive. But they do trust that kid. I truly believe it. I understand the offense concerns. I think you saw the one play that sticks out for that impressed me that game was I think impressed a lot of people, even if it didn't change the thought on JJ McCarthy, was they had that lateral from the running back to JJ McCarthy. He has to stick one hand up, turn his body because it was a bad thrown lateral pass, and throw like a 25-yard pass while he's getting hit by Dallas Turner as he's finishing turning around from bringing in that ball. It's just a showcase of athleticism, arm talent, throw the ball under duress. I thought that was a very impressive play. There was no
It,
lack of impressive plays, but that one was one of them for sure.
he put his traits on display, sporadically, but he put them on display during the game. I think the one that stood out to me most was I think on the last drive, the ball that was tipped was caught by Roman Wilson that got tipped at the line and
Mhm.
never stopped spinning and
Yeah,
just kept going.
it
And
looked like he
again,
overthrew him, but it was a tip.
yeah, and I think you saw it that he has an absolute gun of an arm, and he uses it, and that stuff matters. Now, I think he had a few too many tip balls for my take. I think his arm angle was coming a little bit too low. And
Mhm.
it seemed to me like a point of emphasis that Alabama had. Like I think they've noticed his arm angle, even though he's a tall kid. They were coming at him and they were trying to knock those balls out of the air. I think they feel like, and I think there might be mechanical issues that he has to look at the tape and decide how he's going to approach that. But at the end of the day, like he does have a big arm, and again, is he a complete product? No, not at all. But he has a lot of talent. I still think he's going to go in the mid first round, maybe late first round. I don't think he's going to the second round. I just don't believe it.
I don't think so either. Look, JJ McCarthy today is not better than probably 5 quarterbacks that are in this draft. But the thing is, I don't think the gap is that large from a lot of these guys. I think the gap is much smaller than people are giving him credit for. I think he has better tools than almost every quarterback in this draft. Obviously, guys like Caleb Williams, Drake May have better tools than him, but I think overall his full tool set is up there with anybody in this draft. And he's 20 years old, and I think that he is on track to be a very good quarterback if he continues to develop at the rate he's developing at. I know
yeah.
people like to see quarterbacks be who they are today, makes them feel more comfortable, and I understand that, but I'm trying to project him, and that's why I like JJ McCarthy.
You're trying to project all of them. That's what the draft is about. You take
Yep.
guys and you can incorporate things like how many years have they been in college? What's their age coming out? How projectable are they? Because as we talk about a lot, we look at people's performance as sophomores and compare them to the performance at junior, and you will see a steep difference in performance from sophomore to junior year. But that doesn't mean that they didn't perform well. It just means that they're growing on a natural curve, and the growth rate is something that's important. So at the end of the day, we're looking at a lot of kids. I was really happy because I thought we have some real strong candidates coming out of this class to play quarterback in the NFL. A guy who didn't play, Cam Ward, declared. I actually think it's a mistake for him to declare because I
I
think
think
he's
so
going to.
too.
He's. I think at this point he's hoping to sneak into day two, and there's a chance he falls all the way to day three. I don't think he will. I think somebody's going to take a chance on the talent, but he's certainly not a first round talent, right? Not right now. Like it's hard to say that he has anything to justify a first round grade. So I feel like if he had gone to Ohio State or Miami or Florida State or one of these Power Five
USC.
schools, right, where he could have actually played with some playmakers and had some better coaching and I think he would have had a good year. I think he could have thrust himself firmly not only into first round category, but like top 10 to 15 category of the draft. Like he's that talented a kid. I think he's selling himself as a little bit short. And with the NIL money that he was apparently being offered, I'm really surprised he did this. But
Yeah.
even he wants to go to the NFL, so good luck to him. Anyway, I was pumped up about it, but uh, we have a special episode for you guys. Obviously the Giants are finishing out their season on Sunday, and there's probably going to be news coming out regarding coaches and things about the future the next week. But we have a little bit more than a month to go before the Senior Bowl, or just about a month to go, and we wanted to get a head start on this. So we have decided to give you guys a series. I hope you enjoy it. 4 episodes where we're going through Senior Bowl prospects. We're going to try to go through them maybe about 10 prospects per episode. We're going to do 10 defensive ones today, try to do 10 defensive ones in a week, and go back and forth. Try to get you through about 40 prospects that we think are worthy of paying attention to so that we'll finish this series around the time that the Senior Bowl is beginning to go on, and you'll hopefully start hearing these names and you'll have some information to think back to. So hope you guys enjoy it. It's a little bit different, but we that's what we do here. We go through these players. We try to give you some insight into them. So, Monty, you have any other thoughts before we jump right into this?
Nope. Go ahead and just knock through all these seniors, give you guys a good look for as the Senior Bowl coming up, and I hope you guys enjoy.
All right, why don't you get started with the first player that we were going through?
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull it up. So our first player here, our Senior Bowl preview, we're gonna start with defensive players in this first episode, and we're gonna start with Tavondre Sweat, interior defensive lineman out of Texas. Uh, big dude. 6'4", 362 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit. He is his 5th year in college football this year. And he was the 2023 Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. He had a great season for Texas. He had 45 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 4 passes defended. getting those big palms up there and knocking the ball out of the air. He's a very big dude, a true nose guard. But why don't you tell them about some of the stuff you saw on tape about Devondre Sweat?
Tavondre Sweat is a grizzly bear. He's a mammoth of a human being. When you can't miss him. If you've seen Texas play, you have seen Tavondre Sweat. He sits in the middle of that defensive line and he stands out because he is monstrously large. He's Dexter Lawrence sized, and playing against college kids, it stands out. We watched whatever film we could. I will say that he's had a big year in terms of the ability to have explosive plays and flash athleticism in both the run and the pass game. I think you mentioned some of this stuff. His biggest trait is his size. He's a big dude. He eats up blocks. I mean, he's consistently doubled and triple teamed essentially on every rep. I watched his game against Alabama, and he was just they didn't care about anybody but Tavondre Sweat on that line. They had him double team, chip blocks, triple team, whatever it took to try to stop him. And so just right there as a prospect, that's very intriguing, right? A guy who can occupy that kind of attention, that's a benefit to your team. In terms of his play itself, I think he flashes explosive abilities and he flashes pass rush and getting into the backfield. But I think there are some inconsistencies there. So something I noticed, especially in the Alabama game, with his size, he has a tendency to lose leverage. And I saw there was a consistent effort by linemen to get underneath him, like really get underneath him and get their hands up into his chest. And once they did, I was surprised he had a hard time disengaging from blocks. Like he was stuck in like a leverage, it looked like he was stuck in quicksand once they got their hands underneath him. And they would stand him up straight. He would have a hard time. He In some ways, he doesn't get pushed back, so that's a great thing. Like you can't move him; he's a block, but he doesn't push forward a lot. Like on a lot of reps, he's just like a block of cement stuck in place.
Yeah.
And I feel like more often than not, I saw that. So you want to see a guy like him be able to really push the pile back a little bit more, and it's something I'll be looking for in the Senior Bowl. Is can he do that? Can he win reps and push the pile backwards? Because I didn't see a lot of that in the film. Um, I do think he has some work to do with his hands. I think he has athleticism that's not tapped into. Um, all in all, I think this guy, his calling card is just he's humongous and he's strong as hell. And at minimum, this guy's a two down lineman in the NFL who can just be a run stopping behemoth because he's just sitting there occupying space. But I do think he has the upside to be like a three down lineman with pass rush. If he can work on leverage and his hand technique, he needs coaching. And will he fit on the Giants? I don't know. But what other thoughts did you get about Sweat?
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of what you said is definitely what I noticed about him. You mentioned something about leverage with him. Not only do I feel like he got stood up by defenders, I felt like he stood himself up. I felt like he'd come out of his stance and he would just stand straight up out of his stance, give the offensive line his chest, and he would just be locked in. And you mentioned he had trouble disengaging. I definitely think he needs to work in his hands. I didn't even really see a lot of effort sometimes working his hands. It felt like he just wanted to kind of like bull rush these guys, and you know, sometimes that would work. Other times, like you said, like he would just he wouldn't move. I don't think he drove his legs hard enough. It's hard to when you don't have leverage. It's hard to really get that pushback when they're underneath you. And in result, because he's so big and strong, like you mentioned, he's just stuck in mud. He's just there. He's occupying space, which is great. That's very helpful, but you want more from him. I think his hands and leverage are the two things that really kill him. You mentioned that there's some untapped athleticism. I definitely see it. When he shot a gap correctly or he was chasing down like a running back or something like that, you could definitely see he has a lot of athleticism for a guy as big as he is. I imagine he's going to test pretty well for his size, at least. He's interesting, man. I I think he has some really good numbers here from PFF. I'll mention those real quick. Like he was PFF's number one graded interior defensive lineman with a 91.5. That had a 91.7 run defense grade, 85.3 pass rush grade, 15.3 pass rush win rate grade. So like a lot of really good numbers there. I'm really excited to see this guy work one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. But I definitely have my questions about what his true upside is with those leverage and hand issues. I mean, those are gonna be ultimately coaching things, and I think a coach will want to get their hands on a guy like this. But do you
Yeah.
have any other thoughts on him?
I mean, just a quick thing. I think we should discuss about every player very briefly. Where does he fit with the Giants if they decide to move
Yeah.
on him? Because right now, I think he has sort of like a second to third round grade. He could be a riser depending on the combine, just his pure production and size. Um, does he think? Let's approach these guys in two ways very briefly. Does he fit with Wink Martindale alongside Dexter Lawrence? Does he fit in a 4-3 if Wink Martindale moves on and we get a guy like Frazier? What are your thoughts on that?
So what worries me about bringing in a guy like Sweat is we've done this experiment before where we've brought in we had Dalvin Tomlinson and Dexter Lawrence, and Dexter Lawrence ended up getting knocked over to that defensive end spot. And I don't want to see something happen like that again. He's way, way, way too valuable at nose tackle to move him. I think in a 4-3, it would be interesting. I mean, granted, Wink Martindale, they have those two down interior defensive linemen. You can run something like that, but with like a 4-3, with him being the one of the two interior defensive linemen, I think something like that could work. I mean, especially because Dexter Lawrence is your pass rush guy, even if he's playing from a nose guard position, he's giving you that pass rush. So you have two guys who are just behemoths who eat up double teams, and then Dexter Lawrence also brings that pass rush aspect. So I could see it there, but in a in a standard 3-4, it worries me. I could definitely see the argument in a Wink Martindale system, but what's your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know. He fits more with Wing Martindale if you go and commit to a two down lineman, kind of system. I think he fits there. And at that point, like, how much value does he have? How many reps is he getting? Is he going to be seeing 80% of the snaps or less? I think all those things are considerations. This guy's going to go, he's going to go earlier than a typical defensive lineman. I think because of his production. So I don't know. I have a hard time seeing him ending up on the Giants, to be totally honest. But he's an interesting prospect. Somebody to watch, and I think we'll get back to some of these guys, and it'll be put in better context once we know who our defensive coordinator is going into next year.
Yeah,
So,
and he'll be a fun one to watch the Senior Bowl regardless. He'll be eating up some of these smaller offensive linemen in these one-on-ones. So, he won't be hard to miss at the Senior Bowl.
all right, let's go to the next guy. We're gonna try to get these guys in rapid succession. Number two on our list is a guy we've talked about a lot, Laiatu Latu, edge rusher from UCLA. 6'5", 265, four-star recruit, fifth year. By now, you guys know about him. We've told you about him a few times. He was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year this year. He had 49 tackles, 29 and a half tackles for a loss, 13 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles. He had a over 24% pass rush win rate, which is bananas. That's elite level. But he's your guy. Tell us about Latu. Just refresh our audience about our guy here.
Yeah, man. I mean, Laiatu Latu was our number 2 edge rusher going into our previews, and he's only done enough to help himself. He's rose up. He's our edge one. There obviously are some concerns. I'll get those out of the way real quickly. The main concern here is he previously medically retired when he played at the University of Washington, and it was a neck injury, and obviously that's very concerning. He's come back since then. He transferred to UCLA. He's played 2 fully healthy seasons, and things are looking up for him. Obviously, that's a big cloud over Laiatu Latu, and we'll have to see how his medicals check out. But plain simple, this is the best edge rusher in this class. He has such a diverse toolbox of pass rushing moves. He has so many different moves he used to get to the quarterback. Um, on top of that, he's a very good run defender. I mean, this guy, you mentioned, he's 6'5", 265. He's a very big dude who can hold his own as a run defender. I thought he played well in coverage. He was solid for edge rusher. He played outside linebacker at UCLA, so he did a little bit of everything. But if he got drafted to a 4-3 team, I think he would be perfectly fine. I think he'd be fit great as a 4-3 defensive end. No, he's a size speed type guy. He's not like a freak. Like he's supposedly supposed to run like a 4.7, which is good for a guy his size, but that's not the freaky numbers that we see like of the Myles Garretts of the world, but still really good. Um, the only knocks I really had on this guy other than his medical stuff, he didn't have the best tape versus Oregon State. It was that Fuatu, the right tackle there. He went up against him a good bit, and he bullied him a little bit in the run game. He doesn't have the longest arms in the world, so that can be a disadvantage to him here and there. And I think you saw that a little bit in that game. He also doesn't have the best bend. He doesn't have bad bend, but that's definitely not a strong suit. He wins in other ways than just, getting that one move and then bending the corner and getting to the quarterback. What do you have in Laiatu Latu?
Not a lot. I think we've talked about him a ton already. I think production wise, he was right up there at the top of the edge class this year. And I think if it wasn't for the medicals, he would make a very, very strong case to be edge one off the board. In fact, I think he would be edge one off the board if it wasn't for the medicals, because, like you said, he can be a stand up outside linebacker, edge rusher, or he can be a hand of the dirt 4-3 defensive end. He's got the size and the speed and the arsenal to do all of those things. And he's a really, really dominant player against the run and against the pass. And yeah, he'll struggle a little bit against some of the top tackles in the country. Not that he was bad, he just wasn't completely dominant in that game. But I think that the medicals are going to be an issue. I think that's the issue for him. And I don't know if he goes top 10 because of medicals. In fact, if I had to guess, I'm going to guess he does not go top 10. I've said for a while, I think he's going in the 10 to 20 range, which I think is going to go be, 5, 7 picks later than he should have gone, probably because of the medicals. People are going to pass on him, and he'll probably land in that Jalen Phillips range, where he went at the end of the team. So I don't see too many pathways where he ends up being the guy the Giants take. I think they're probably going to be a little gun shy about his history, and if they go with an edge rusher, I think there are other names on the edge list that will intrigue them more. But
Yeah.
he's a damn good player, and he's going to be a good NFL player. I have no doubt about that.
Side note, a team that I just thought of that I could see being a good fit, be Chicago Bears, with them having, that being their second pick in the first round. It's a little bit less risky. They keep
They're at
kind of
10 right
dropping
now.
that draft pick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that being a good fit for him.
And that's a great point, because if they beat the Packers this week, I think they'll fall to like the mid-teens with their own pick. I can 100% see them take, like, Latu would fall right in that range, right? Like that mid-teens. I think that's kind of where he goes. So that's a great point, and I think he would fit their system very well.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about him a lot. He's a great player. We'll see where he lands. Whoever gets him is going to get a damn fine edge rusher. I think
Well,
that's the bottom line.
the one thing I'll say, just to me, as far as the Senior Bowl conversation, this guy is going to make offensive tackles look fucking silly. He's going to ruin offensive tackle stock at the Senior Bowl. He
Yeah.
like 101's already such a disadvantage for these offensive tackles. Going up
Against
against
this guy,
Latu is just not fair.
yeah, this guy needs help in blocking, and most of these guys are going to get run around. It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So keep it. Be kind to them when you're
Yeah.
watching them.
Throw away the Latu 101 reps for
Yeah.
for these guys.
All right, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it. All
Why don't
right.
you introduce our guy here?
Yep. So this is another guy we talked about, I think in our second episode of our
Hmm.
previews. Ruke Orhorhoro, interior defensive lineman out of Clemson. He's 6'4", 290 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit. He's a 5th-year player. This year he had 25 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, one pass defended. I want to point out in 2022 he had 5 passes defended. So yeah, he was knocking those balls down way more. I'd be curious to go check back where he was playing in 2022 and if he played a lot more inside then. Oh, actually, probably we have it here. Um, yeah, it looks like he. I don't know. I'll look into this a little bit while you're talking, but but that dropped and they played him all over this year. So would be interesting because that's a big drop off. But he definitely got his hands on the ball last year. But the only other things I had about him before you go into him is he did have an injury red shirt in 2020, so that kind of slowed him down for his start. And he started playing football his junior year of high school. So he's still kind of learning the game despite, him being a fifth-year player in college. He's been getting better and better, but why don't you tell us a little bit about Ruke Orhorhoro?
He's the guy that had a bit of a disjointed college career because of the redshirt injury year. He played in 21 when Ryan Brzee was injured. I think when he tore his ACL, so he got to play that year and he did a good job. And then in 22, he didn't play because he was behind Brzee before he finished his college career, and he got to play again. So he's a little bit of a disjointed career in terms of production numbers and stats. But I think this guy's sort of like he can play all over the line, but he's really kind of your classic three tech at 6'4", 290. Like you said, he's a bit of a raw football player. He hasn't played very long. Um, the word that came to mind watching his film was he's just solid in every way. Nothing spectacular, really. Like there's nothing spectacular about his game, but he's just really solid. Let me give you guys some examples. Um, they move him all over the line. Like Clemson had him playing nose, they had him playing lined up, opposite the guards, they had him lined up all the way on the outside, opposite tackles. They really moved him around the line, excuse me. And wherever he was, he kind of has a nose to push linemen and push the pile right towards the ball carrier. That seems to be his game. Like when you watch him, he has really, really good feet. This guy plays with a hot motor. Like once his legs start going, they don't move. They don't stop until like the play is dead. Like he just keeps going, and he pushes the pile. That's what I see him do constantly. Like he latches on. He doesn't like we mentioned with Sweat. Like he'll just stop. Right, momentum will just stop. With Aurora, like the pile is moving in some direction. He moves it left. Even if he's not going forward, he's moving left. He's moving right. His eyes are always on the ball carrier, and he's always trying to guide the pile to create traffic in front of the ball carrier. It's something I noticed that he does. And at first I noticed it, I was like, that's interesting. And then I saw him do it over and over and over again. I was like, okay, this is a part of his game. This is what he's doing. He's trying to create traffic. If he can't get burst himself through the line to break up a tackle, he's just trying to create traffic. And he's using his motor and his legs and his footwork to push that pile. So I think that's a very nice skill of his. Um, he doesn't have a big pass rush arsenal. It's all power rush. He gets up and he tries to bully his way in. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he doesn't. He has good hands. He has good feet. I think there's still something there in the tank from his athleticism to be coached. I think there are pass rush moves he can learn, but I think at his floor, to me, is actually a three down interior defensive lineman who can be trusted against the pass and pass rush, and a very, very good run stopper. At minimum, a complimentary interior defensive lineman to your premier guy. We have a guy like Dexter Lawrence, which makes life easier. I think he'd be a nice compliment to Dex, no matter what kind of system we're in. So that was sort of my takeaway. I think he's right now he's grading out to be somewhere in like the I guess like third round range, right? As a prospect,
I think
third
so.
round,
Third,
mid
fourth
third.
round around there.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think what you said was true. He's just a very solid player. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Dex would like having another Clemson interior defensive lineman next to him,
That's
but
yeah.
he I really just liked his versatility. I liked how he played, and he played well everywhere. They played him over the tackle, outside the tackle, in the B gap, the A gap. And he was a successful player who continued to get push against the offensive line. He has a high motor, and you mentioned his feet were always moving. I saw his hands were always moving. It felt like he was always working to get hands off him. I mean, to the point sometimes like if he just got stalled, he kind of looked dumb because he wasn't giving up on the play, and he's just throwing his hands and he's locked up. But he it was effort there, and when he continues to do that, eventually sometimes that would work, and he would get past the offensive lineman who normally originally had him stonewalled, and then he would, get pressure on the quarterback. He isn't somebody who I felt was dominating. He did not pop off the screen when I watched him play, but he never looked like a liability to me on the field. I thought that was important about him. And I thought he showed a lot of pass rush upside from an interior defensive lineman. Nothing special, but it felt like he is somebody who's going to give everything he has to come at the quarterback every time. And hey, we always talk about Andre Patterson and how important he is when we're talking about these interior defensive linemen. And for a guy who seems so willing to use his hands, if Andre Patterson could teach him to use his hands more effectively, I think I could see that going along with that's how you could see him take the next jump as a player because he is a very good athlete from all things considered. So yeah, I like him. I think like you said, at the very least, he's a good rotational piece, which I think is important when you're drafting a guy
I
like
think he's scheme versatile. I think that's the part I like about him the most. That like I don't have to worry who our DC is. I think this is a guy who fits in any system because he's done that at Clemson. So I think he's solid. He's someone to watch. I want to see how he performs in one-on-one drills. Although that I think that may overestimate some of his stuff a little bit as it tends to for the D linemen. But you want to see what you hear about him in the just you get reports on these guys from the Senior Bowl. He's someone to watch. I don't think he's going to move up or down boards too much. I really doubt that with his testing or anything else. I think he's going to be where he is. But that third round range, that's kind of where like the Giants should be thinking about getting a defensive lineman. And
Yep.
he's versatile, so he's someone to watch. I think he's someone who can easily fit into the Giants' plans. Um,
He's definitely somebody who catches my eye every single time I do these mock draft simulators.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue for the next guy. Let me introduce him. We're going on an interior defensive line run right now. So our next guy is McKinley Jackson, another interior defensive lineman from Texas A&M, 6'2", 325, four-star recruit, fourth-year player. He had 27 tackles this year, 5.5 for loss, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble. Monty, tell me about McKinley Jackson.
I like McKinley Jackson, man. He definitely is a guy who pops off the tape more than some of the guys that we've talked about so far. The first thing I noticed about him is he just fires out of his stance and he has these heavy hands and brings them and extends the offensive lineman immediately. He every single time his hands are coming with him out of stance and is getting extension and pushing the offensive lineman away from him. And it does a really good job of taking this where he can stack and shed these offensive linemen because when he keeps them at these distance, it's hard for them to really, control him in the run game. And you consistently see him pull the offensive lineman off him and make a play on a run on the running back. Um he hasn't moved really easily. I think, him just being a big, strong guy and then also, using his arms effectively is a big part of that. He gets good push on the pocket. See, I said he has good pushback power. He definitely will take the lineman and push him back into the backfield. It's not like anything crazy. He's not done not like a Dexter Lawrence by any means, nothing like a nose tackle type thing, but he definitely gets some good push on these guys. They line him up all over, just like we kind of said about Rook. Um, he lines up a little bit everywhere. Not quite as much as Rook, but he does have that part of his game. Then what I had for him as far as a negative, one thing I saw consistently is he didn't doesn't play with the best balance. I saw him try to take the half man with these offensive linemen and try to kind of work past them for a pass rush, and they'll kind of just wash him, and he'll just kind of get knocked to the ground. And when he has his arms extended and he kind of takes a full man and just kind of like makes a move when he needs to, I felt he did really good. But when he tries to take a half man and kind of shoot a gap, I felt like he kind of just got knocked to the ground way more often than I would like. But I know you were a big fan of McKinley Jackson, so why don't you tell them a little bit about your thoughts on him?
I think you touched on a lot of it. I think there's nothing not to like when you watch his tape. He's explosive. He stands out, right? Even if you weren't watching him specifically, you notice him because he's exploding into the backfield, like on off the snap. Like he times the snap so well, and he's just on linemen and pushing them backwards right away. And the guy uses like this cannon-like attack. So he's a lot of fun to watch. Something like Ruke Orhorhoro is not a ton of fun to watch,
Yeah.
but you appreciate his motor and his technical skills. Jackson is a lot of fun to watch. He's a guy that really is a disruptor, is how I would describe him. He's a disruptive player, but like you mentioned, the downsides are the balance issues. Because he definitely sacrifices balance to create explosion, and I think a good interior lineman will take advantage of that and keep knocking him to the ground. So that's something he's gonna have to work on. But I really liked him. I think this is a guy that you could coach some of the carelessness out of without losing the explosiveness, because I think he has that raw power. Another guy that I think is sort of like a maybe second, third round guy, maybe a little later. We'll see where things land, but he's in that day two range. If I think he's versatile, like Aurora. He can go all over the line, and I think he is scheme versatile. I think he can play in a 4-3, he can play in a 3-4. Definitely another guy to watch for the Giants. Really, I think he's a potential target for this team.
Yeah, and I think if you look at his numbers, you see a really well-rounded player, which showed up on the tape. I mean, pass rush grade is 69.1, run defense grade 76.9, and 8.2 pass rush win rate, which is very solid for an interior defensive lineman. So, 6.2 run stop rate is fine. So, really, kind of just quality all-around player who, like you said, he flashes on the tape more than kind of some of these other guys do.
Yeah, another one of these guys to watch. I think right in that range, day two, early day three, mid day two to early day three. That's where these guys are going to land, and I think that's where the Giants are probably going to be eyeing these types of players. That's where the good ones land generally, right?
Yep.
The good interior linemen, you're going to find them right in that range. All right, let's go on to our next guy. I will. Who introduced us?
You
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and introduce the next guy?
Yep. So our next guy, Tommy Eichenberg, inside linebacker, Ohio State, the brother of Liam Eichenberg, Miami offensive guard. 6'2", 239 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit. This is his 5th year. I actually, let's see. I have his stats right here. No, I don't. I'll pull those up. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about Tommy Eichenberg?
Tommy Eichenberg is a guy we discussed in our linebacker review. He had a really solid 2022 campaign, middle linebacker who was sort of the responsible Mike for Ohio State's defense. Had a lot of tackles. I think he had like 90 something tackles in 2022. He really had a down year this year. I'm not sure why, but his tackles went way down to like in the 50s. And when you watch his tape, I don't know what's happened, but he looks just like a very, very average to even a below average athlete, which is kind of a warning sign for linebackers. He looks slow footed when you watch him out there. There's no other way to describe it. He looks a little bit slow. He doesn't look very rangy. He is very disciplined. I will give him that. And this is a person who maintains gap discipline very religiously. He's not someone who does stupid things. Like he's not making mistakes. You're not losing reps because of his mistakes. He's just not flying all over the field. He does recognize plays well. He drops into a lot of zone coverage, and he's pretty decent. But his zone range again is limited because he's not running all over the field. Doesn't seem to have that kind of athleticism. He is a good run blitzer. I think he recognizes plays very quickly, and he can use run blitz to break up plays. He's a smart player, and I think he makes up for a lot of his lack of athleticism with his intelligence and his experience. Um, he's decent in many ways. He plays with good leverage. He has good stack and shed. He hunts. We put out our notes before, hunt like wolves. He does that as a gang tackler. Um, but like I said, as a linebacker, to me, he looks very limited. I was telling you before we did the recording, he reminds me so much in terms of his decline from his previous year to his draft eligible year. He reminds me so much of Noah Sewell.
Yeah.
A guy who was getting first, second round comps and then really just had a bad year and looked slow footed and fell. I have a bad feeling for Eichenberg. He is going to plummet down the draft boards.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. To get his stats, I have it up now. So he had 82 tackles this year, 2.5 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. So in comparison to last year, the year before, he had 120 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. So a significant drop off there statistically, and it's represented here in the PFF scores as well, going from a 86.8 grade to a 60.9. big drop off. I know the game I watched, I saw the same player, but I haven't gone through every single one of these games, and stats clearly represent it. So, he didn't have a good year. I think the biggest one you're seeing here is him in coverage. 100.5 passer rating allowed, a 75 completion percentage allowed. There's really, really bad numbers. And he's just not an athlete. And it seems like he was a liability this year in coverage, which isn't totally surprising from what we saw last year. I mean, he never was like a rangy guy or a guy that was great in coverage. What I did like about Tommy Eichenberg, um, for what it's worth, is what I liked about when we talked about in the linebacker episode. He's a very intelligent player, and you can see it when you watch him on tape. You can see him calling out offensive formations to his defense. You can see him time snaps as a blitzes. He's a competitive, a tough guy. Um, I still think he is like an NFL player. I think that he brings a lot from that level, and I think he is a very technically sound player. I mean, you can see his missed tackle rate is 8.7, which is really solid for a linebacker. They said gang tackles, he plays with leverage, all that type of stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, I do think he is going to drop. I think mixed with a down year with his athleticism problems, I think he's probably going to fall day 3. But I mean, look, the Senior Bowl is for guys like this. He's going to go out there. He's going to play with a bunch of guys he's never played with before in his life. He's going to try to show his leadership. He's going to try to show his intelligence when he gets in the meetings with these teams. People are going to fall in love with the person who is Tommy Eichenberg. That's what he's going to try to sell when he comes into here, and we'll see how it goes, man. I like I said, I think he'll be an NFL player, but I also think that there's 1,000 Tommy Eichenbergs out there. You know what I mean? Like he's not. There's nothing special about
Yeah, and I think when you're showing a lack of athleticism at the linebacker position, that's a big warning sign because it's really a position where you need to be an athlete. You need to have some baseline level of athleticism. You can't make up for it all with just being a smart player because the NFL game moves so quickly. If you look slow in college, I really worry about how you're going to look in the NFL. So, um, I'm not super intrigued by him, to be honest, for the
it. Yeah,
Giants.
and we'll
All
we'll
right.
see if he does any better in coverage because that's something that people are going to want to see here at the Senior Bowl. That's something he's going to have to be ready to show that he is not as bad as he was this year in coverage.
This is a great segue to another linebacker with a completely different evaluation and trajectory.
Yes, sir.
So our next guy is linebacker Payton Wilson from NC State, 6'4", 238 pounds. He was a four-star recruit. He's a sixth-year player, so he's been there a while. He had a season-ending injury in 2018. That was his second knee injury, so medicals are an issue. In 21, he had a shoulder injury, but he was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Um, in this past year, insane production, 138 tackles, 17 and a half tackles for a loss, 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, 6 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble. Those are banana stats for a linebacker. He had 108 tackles in 2020 off the bench, led the team. Um, he is a bit of a freak athlete. 4.49 40 time is what the reported number is, and a 4.21 shuttle with a 390-pound bench press, 35.5-inch vertical jump, and a 9 foot 8.5 inch broad jump. This guy is an athlete. Tell us about Peyton Wilson, Monty.
Yeah, man. Peyton Wilson's a guy that we missed on our original linebacker preview, which is funny because we were really trying to look with guys that had a little bit more size, which Peyton Wilson has. But, he was a guy who had like 88 tackles last year, was coming off injury and didn't have, he had a good year for coming off injury, but he obviously wasn't fully himself. And this year he got back to that to the form that he was when he got 108 tackles off the bench, and he totally went off as a full-time starter, had an incredible season. You see how long he is when he plays, and you can see it whether he's in the run game, he's in coverage, or rushing the passer. He does all of those from the off-ball linebacker position. The athleticism pops. It pops off the screen. I mean, this guy goes sideline to sideline and is always making plays on the ball, it seems like. His closing speed is ridiculous when he is decides to close in on the quarterback, especially, and he's playing him. He just comes in like a bat out of hell to make a play. The effort is always there. And so one thing I point out here is, kind of something we're talking about with coverage being a problem with Eichenberg. With Payton Wilson, his coverage grades are phenomenal. He had 90.4 coverage grade from PFF. He had 26 coverage stops, which was first in all of PFF in college football. He had a 47.2 passer rating allowed. Like, he had a very, very good year coverage. From the game I watched, I didn't see like all these crazy coverage plays, but at the same time, I noted down like it looks like this guy's gonna be able to cover to the next level. Like he would flip his hips and he'd run with anybody he had to cover. He had the athleticism and he was right there to make a play. He just wasn't really being challenged when I saw, which is, I mean, it's a good sign. The only negatives I really had on him is I didn't see him as super instinctual player. I felt like he was kind of a tick slow sometimes, which, I mean, his freakish athleticism let him get away with, but I didn't see him have this innate instincts that, like a Jeremiah Trotter that we went over previously had. And I felt like sometimes he would struggle to get hands off him in the run game. I felt like once offensive lineman would get a hands on him, he kind of struggled to disengage. What do you have, and what do you think of Peyton Wilson?
I think what pops off of the film when you watch him is just his speed. And it's like the opposite of Eichenberg. He's flying all over the tape. Like he goes from one side of the field to the other. He's outrunning like you see him just like running past dudes on his own team, chasing down ball carriers. He has so much range, so much speed. He's an athlete. And I think when it comes to linebackers, again, I'll say it, you really want an athlete. You want a guy who's rangy, who's fast, who can be used in coverage, who could be used in blitzes and pass rush and run stop. You want an athlete. It's not the only thing, but it's an important thing. So he's got that baseline stuff. I think he's going to absolutely destroy the combine. Like this guy is going to blow up the combine. I'm so confident in that. I think his range, his stock is going to only go up. Um, he misses some tackles, but not a lot. He's like for a guy who has his speed. He's a pretty solid tackler.
Four
I
feet
had really
seven.
nothing. Yeah, dude. Like I don't really have anything bad to say about him. I was really impressed watching him. I think medicals are going to be a part of his evaluation. That might be a big issue, but he might be as high as like linebacker 2 in this class, as good as he's playing. So he's gonna rise, and I think he's gonna outperform certain people. He's gonna take the role that Barrett Carter was supposed to take if he declared
Yep.
as that athlete, right? He's that guy. So
Way more size.
a much bigger Barrett Carter, right? Exactly. But he's taking that mantle. So I'm pumped to see this guy play. Like, I don't know how much you're getting in Senior Bowl reps from linebackers. You want to see the coverage stuff, obviously. I think he'll do a good job there. I think we're going to learn about who he is. A lot of it, believe it or not, is going to be in athletic testing because I think that really matters. And at the combine, I think he's going to put on a show. So, listen, we go to a 4-3 defense. Even if we don't, we just want to upgrade the room. This is the kind of guy you want,
Yeah.
and it might be a little bit too rich for our blood, depending on where he goes in the draft. But I really like Peyton Wilson.
Yeah, especially if we go to 4-3, because I do see him as an outside linebacker, and I
Yeah,
think that's, he would be a really good Sam linebacker, in my
yeah.
opinion. You can let a guy
He
like
did.
Okereke play the will,
He didn't
something
play a
like
lot of
that.
Mike. I think on most of his reps, he was playing like like weak side, and
Yeah,
coming from the outside, covering and rotating. But he generally started on the outside in most of his reps.
yeah, and some things I am interested in seeing him with at the Senior Bowl. You mentioned coverage. I am interested in coverage rep. I'm also interested to see if he gets some pass rush reps, because he did have a lot of pass rush reps in college. I mean, 156 reps this year pass rushing. So I'd be interested to see how he does if he gets some reps there with some of those edge players. Obviously, he's gonna be I don't know, obviously, but I think he's pretty clearly gonna be an off ball linebacker at the next level, but he offers some of that pass rush ability in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned uh does not does not miss a lot of tackles, 4.7 missed tackle rate, ridiculously good. He's a really good player, man, and he's seemed to kind of flown under the radar to this point. And I think the Senior Bowl is going to put an end to that. I think he's going to pop on people's radar, especially like you said, the combine will officially put an end to that. But Trotter and Payton Wilson are some of the two of my two favorite guys that I've seen on tape, and I like them both more. And I liked Barrett Carter on tape, but I was not as high on as other people. I like Payton Wilson a lot.
Love it. Love it. I love this guy's tape. All right, man. Why don't you take us to our next? So that's our D linemen and our linebackers. Rapid fire. Went through six of them. We're going into the secondary now. So this is your guy. Why don't you introduce him for us?
Sure. So this was somebody we talked about in our quarterback preview episode. He was my guy on that one, and he's risen up quickly since we've talked about him there. Quinyon Mitchell, quarterback out of Toledo. He's 6 foot, 196 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit, and this is his his fourth year senior. He had 41 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 18 passes defended. Just insane. And one of the reasons this guy got on my radar was because he is a Feldman freak. I love looking at that Feldman freak list. He runs in the 4.3s. He has a bench press of 21 reps at 225, and he squats 440 pounds. This is a guy who I think has ridiculously high upside from his success so far in college and his athleticism. I mean, just for example, he had a 92.5 PFF grade in 2022 and a 91.4 in 2023. Both of those were number one in the country both years. He has a 91.4 coverage grade this year, only allowed a 43.5 completion percentage. So just ridiculous stats, ridiculous athletic testing numbers, all that. Tell us what you thought when you watched the Quinyon Mitchell tape, Sal.
So he looks a lot. I told you this before. He looks a lot bigger than 6 feet, 196 pounds. I don't know what it is, but he looks imposing on the field. Did you notice that? He
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 looks
he.
long.
he I think it's probably his wingspan is my guess, right?
Yeah.
When they measure him, he's gonna have like these like freaking, like condor arms, like like
Which we will
reaching
learn
out.
at the Senior Bowl.
We will, and he looks it like he looks just like he's got a lot of wingspan. Um, as you mentioned, you can tell right off the bat, like when he plays, he's the best athlete on the field. He's quick, he's fast, he has great long speed. He can run with anybody, like anybody. I didn't see anybody outrun this guy. That you mentioned that 4.3 40 speed. I wouldn't be shocked if he beats 4.3. I would not be shocked watching him play. He's so fast. Um, he uses his length very well. Like he's actually technically very sound. I saw him play a lot of off man and zone match principles in college. I think that it seems like that was the defense they were running, but what the reps that I saw him play in press, he was very comfortable. Like, jamming guys at the line, running with them, staying stride for stride and using his length to just erase these guys. Really like oily hips. Like you see him flip his hips real quickly, really smooth, transitions fast. Um, he's a he's got cornerback one potential in the NFL. Like I looked at him and I'm like, this guy with a little bit of coaching, this guy has the athletic upside and the speed, just the natural traits to be a cornerback one. So I'm pretty excited about this guy. I don't know if you mentioned this, but he's been the top ranked corner on PFF for the last 2 years.
Yep.
Not just this year, but also last year. There's something there, but when you watch the film, you can kind of see why. Obviously, playing at Toledo, the competition's, you have to wonder how much that played into it. But he played Ohio State, and you mentioned like he looked good against JSN and Ibuka and Marvin Harrison. He didn't look like he was out of place at all. So um, I'm excited about this guy. I think he's another one who's going to blow up the combines. I think he's a guy who's going to rise up, especially if his 40 time with these corners. You're looking at the 40 times. I, I'm not going to be shocked if I hear this guy is running just under 4.3 or right around 4.3. And I think his stock's going to just surge. So I really like this guy. If the Giants decide they want to go cornerback early in this draft, I think he's definitely a target. And we thought about him long and hard in our mock draft,
Yep.
in our 7 round mock, and I think there's reason for it. And by the
Yeah,
way, I
man.
think he fits in any system. I think this is a guy you can play in Wink Martindale's press system as a press man. You can put him in a zone system. I think he has the athleticism and the ability to play anywhere.
I agree, man. And I'll say, I don't think there is a player at the Senior Bowl that is more important to them than the Senior Bowl than Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell legitimately could propel himself to, I would say, the top half of the first round if he goes to the Senior Bowl and dominates like D1 competition, these top wide receivers that are going there. If he shows that his success at Toledo was not because of his competition at Toledo and continues to dominate these people at the Senior Bowl, his stock is going to fly up. And it's gonna be he's the guy to watch. He is the guy to watch for the next few months of the at in the draft cycle, but he's also the guy to watch at the Senior Bowl. He is a really intriguing player. They consistently stuck this guy on an island at Toledo and played around him. They let him take the number one wide receiver and they let their entire defense worry about the rest of the team. And he went ahead and was the number one player, according to all of PFF for cornerbacks, and despite getting no help. Um, so like you said, freak athlete, um, really good, really oily hips, and he's really smooth in transitions. Like run with anybody. Held his own with that tape that we had of him at Ohio State, where he going up against like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, Mika Buka, Marvin Harrison Jr. Really interested by him and really want to see him at the Senior Bowl. But that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
No, let's transition to the next guy. Um, so sticking with our cornerbacks, this is a guy we went over. We both liked him. Um, I'm gonna introduce him to you guys. It was one of my guys, if I recall, or maybe I think he was number 3 on our list, if I recall, something like that. Josh
He was
Newton,
on our
cornerback.
initial list.
Yeah, Josh Newton, cornerback of TCU, out of TCU, 6 foot, 190 pounds. He was a 2-star wide receiver coming out of high school. He's a 6-year player, so he's a little bit older as a prospect. As a transfer from University of Louisiana Monroe, he had 33 tackles, 1 interception, 9 pass deflections. Um, I think what stands out with him is he's a really, really, really well coached and technically sound press man corner. If you need a press man corner, this is your guy. And he looks so experienced and so good at it. He's smooth, he's fast, he's sticky with receivers. He has long speed. He's got all the traits you need. He's technically very refined. He's a very good athlete, quick, fluid. He's got all the traits you're looking for. He's competitive. He fights through the catch point. There's a lot to like on him. So I love this guy when you watch him. Every time I watch him, I really enjoy him. And I think he's a little bit of an underrated prospect. But what are your thoughts on Newton?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Josh Newton, man. And obviously, the elephant in the room is if Wink Martindale will be returning to the New York Giants. But if we're working under the assumption that he is, just for this discussion, Josh Newton is like the perfect player to bring in. I do think he's a good athlete. He runs with really fast wide receivers. He's sticky in man to man despite who he's going against. But I don't see a necessarily a special player who pops off the screen. I see a guy who is just a very solid player who's exactly what you look for in man to man. And I think he would be the perfect cornerback too to go across from Deontay Banks. I would be very happy sticking him in that role and being like, we have our top two quarterbacks. Let's ride. Because I mean, he was a part of, not a national champion defense, but a national championship defense in TCU, and with LaDainian Tomlinson's cousin or whatever, and Tre'Davious Tomlinson, like they made a really strong group there. He's well coached. He he has quick feet, fluid hips, explosive. I see he bursts to make plays on the ball. He covers one on one constantly, does it very well. So he's a scrappy player. One stat I had on him is in 2022, he was number 3 in FBS with a 35.3 percent reception rate allowed, which was one spot ahead of Devin Witherspoon. So just a really strong year, and came back and had a maybe not quite as good of a year as he had in 2022. It was a down year all around by TCU, but still a very strong year. Um, the only negatives I had on him was that, he can be a little bit grabby when he's losing in a foot race, and he sometimes can be a tick slow when he's reading the quarterback wide receiver. But do you have anything else to add about Josh Newton?
Nope. He's a guy that if Wink is here, we should look at drafting. And if Wink is not here, we're probably not going to draft.
Unless
It's
it's
kind
another
of
man guy.
right. I mean, of course, if we go to another man to man like press guy, as a DC, I just think he's a technically sound cornerback. I think he's just solid, and I wouldn't mind having him, but I do think he's best suited in like a Wink Martindale type defense. So that's
Agreed.
kind of all I have on him. And he ranks somewhere like I think he's got about a mid second round grade right now. So you want him, you're gonna have to get him probably like let's say that with that Seattle pick, for example, it'll be in that range if you want him.
Yep.
And I think that's reasonable for a cornerback. You're getting a starting quarterback. Um, but that's it on him. We again, a lot of this depends on who our DC is. So we'll
Yeah.
see. Let's go to the next guy. You want to introduce us to our next cornerback here?
Yep. So our next one we have here is Kris Abrams-Draine. I think, as I say, he's cornerback from Missouri. He's 5'11", 178 pound. He was a 3-star wide receiver recruit, actually, who he got transitioned to cornerback. He's in his 4th year, and this year he had 51 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 13 passes defended, good amount there, and 1 forced fumble. Had a really strong coverage grade this year with 89.6. So really, really solid coverage player. But why don't you tell him about some of the stuff you saw on tape with this guy?
Yeah. So I mean, he's interesting because he's a converted wide receiver, um, and I think he showcases some ball skills that I think look like what you would expect from a converted wide receiver. But I was left a little bit underwhelmed, I would say, by his ball skills, at least his consistency. At the catch point, like there were times where he would get mossed and he just didn't have his hands near there. Um, there are other times he had a lot of deflections. I mean, the stats suggest he has a ton of deflections, right? He had 13 pass deflections. So maybe I just need to watch more of him. What I noticed is he's basically an off-man corner. I almost never saw him in press sets. I think he worked best with the receiver in front of him. And he does a good job of keeping the receiver in front of him. I think he stays sort of in phase with receivers that way. Um, but he didn't. I didn't see anything explosive or overly athletic. He's pretty fluid with his hips. He can turn, but I didn't. I think this was a technically decent cornerback. I didn't see like elite skills at any level. Um, I guess I was left a little bit underwhelmed. I think the stats suggest he's a better player. Maybe he's a guy that I can see this guy perhaps being a nickel, I really do. I think he could be a nickel in the NFL, especially like in a zone system. I think he's definitely a zone corner more than anything.
Yeah.
I don't see him translating to like a man-to-man corner in the NFL. But listen, if we convert to a zone-based system, I think this guy could be very solid. But yeah, I mean, I have to say I wasn't left super thrilled watching his film, but maybe that was just my bias in watching. What were your thoughts?
I was a fan of Washington, but I do agree with you. Like I see him as a zone coverage type guy. You touched on some of the positives I have for him, but I was really high on like his ability to keep the wide receivers in front of him. Like you said, he played this like far back off ball type formation, and when he would play the wide receiver, he'd make sure to play them off, and he would stay with ability to come up and make a play, but make sure they're always in front of him. I felt like he played really good leverage on these wide receivers, and he would be smooth flipping his hips and using the sideline to his advantage, and making sure that he put himself in this position to succeed against these guys, and I felt like often he did. I didn't really see this guy just get straight beat. I felt like he always put himself in a position to be successful, which I really liked about his tape. Like you said, I don't think he is the strongest player. I think if you asked him to be a man-to-man corner, I think you'd see him get beat a lot more often. But I think when you ask him to kind of own his zone and play to his advantage against the wide receiver he's going against, I think he does a very good job at doing that.
I think that's fair, and maybe that's why I think I've been conditioned to look for Wink Martindale's type of corners
Yeah.
for the last couple of years, and I see guys like this, and I'm like, eh. But the reality is, like the majority of the NFL has guys like this, right? They run schemes for guys like this fit in very nicely, so he fits. I just don't know where in terms of draft profile, and I didn't go. I have to go back and see where he's graded out. I want to say he's sort of like a day three guy, but yeah, he's right now graded in like the middle of the fourth or fifth round. So I didn't see enough athleticism to make me think this guy's going to be a combine warrior. Maybe he will be. You never know. Sometimes you get surprised, and maybe it's just his play style. But I think for him to rise up to be like outside of day three to creep into day two, he's going to have to put on a show at the combine. I think combines really do help cornerbacks. You know, when guys can show you that they have long speed and a lot of quickness, then that really helps their stock. So I'm curious to see how he tests at the Senior Bowl. I mean, he's played at the SEC against good competition. He was solid. I don't know how much he gains from the actual reps at the Senior Bowl, but he'll be there. So, are you looking for anything in particular when he gets there?
Um, no, nothing specific. I mean, you just really with a lot of these corners, you just look for them not to get embarrassed when they get to the Senior Bowl. Because
That's fair.
it very often happens. A guy comes in completely just looks like an idiot out there. So, hopefully especially when he's one on one, he doesn't totally embarrass himself. One thing I will mention, he did have a very low run defense grade, 58.3. Which again, if he's going to be in a zone defense, that's not the best thing to see out of your zone corners. So, that's tough. But I didn't necessarily notice him being a terrible run defender, but obviously still a lot more work to need to be done on these guys. But so I guess something to look for too is how he plays in kind of like run defense and things like that. But that's all I really have. Do you have anything else on this guy?
Nope.
All
I
right.
think that takes us to our last guy.
Yep.
So number 10 of 10 for today. Uh, I'm going to say this wrong. Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron. I listed him as just a defensive back from Texas. He's listed some places as a safety, some places as a cornerback. I think he's basically a nickel back. 5'11", 192 pounds, four-star recruit. He's in his fourth year. He was a former track star. I think you can see that on the film. He had 60 tackles this year, 4.5 for a loss, one interception, 6 pass deflections. Um, I liked him. Tell me what you thought about him. Well, I think he's worth a little bit of a discussion here.
Yeah, I think so too. He fits in a lot with kind of the what we saw last year from the safeties in last year's draft. There's just a lot of nickel corners, like safety hybrids, and I think he fits into another one of those type of guys. Um, he is a track star. I didn't see the best athleticism out of him, but you know, it'll be interesting what he runs and see that more. But that's not something I loved about him. I don't think he is a man guy. I think that he is more of a zone coverage type player. Whenever I saw him getting put man to man, I didn't love when I saw, especially vertically. I felt like when wide receiver took him vertically, he got absolutely burnt. That probably is where some of my athleticism concerns come from. But overall, he's a really good versatile player. I mean, he's a guy who can play outside. He doesn't do it a ton, but he can do it. But he, can play like linebacker. He can play at nickel corner. He can play at safety. He kind of play all over, and he's a very instinctual player. who feels like he's always in the right place at the right time. He's a very good blitzer, and is good at not letting blockers get their hands on him when he comes in. He's a high effort guy. I saw him constantly go sideline to sideline, making plays, no matter where he started and where the ball's going. He always found a way to make a play over there. Um, but this was a guy that you really liked when we were talking. So, what are your opinions on
Yeah, I called him Kirkland Cooper DeJean.
him?
But not exactly, because I think Cooper can obviously he's a much better prospect, and I think
He'd be
Cooper
great
can
value.
stick. Yeah, I think Cooper. Yeah, very good value. Cooper DeJean's obviously a guy who's a first round value, and I think he can play on the outside, but I think he projects best. I think we discussed it as like a nickel corner slash safety, but just kind of an eraser. Now, I don't think Barron is an eraser at that level, but I think he's so versatile that you can line up kind of anywhere, and he's got the physical ability to do that. I pulled up his stats. Like his snap count is really kind of funny to read. So he had 637 snaps this year on defense. Listen to this. He lined up on the D line 30 times. He
Oh
lined
my
up in the
god.
slot lined up in the slot 389 times, lined up at corner 43 times. That's what they call outside corner. He lined up in the box 154 times, and he lined up deep as a deep safety 21 times. He was all
Yeah.
over the field. And so Texas really made use of the versatility, and I think you see that. And his ability, that's why I like his athleticism. I think he's able to play a lot of different roles. One thing that stands out on tape is like he's like a see ball, get ball kind of guy, like he has that linebacker mentality.
Yeah.
And he really he just goes after the play wherever it is. I do think he can play some press and some man, but I think it depends on who he's doing it against. Like I actually think he can carry some tight ends. I might disagree with you a little bit there.
Mhm.
I thought enough athleticism where he can carry tight ends and man. He can definitely do it in zone. I think he has the ability to do that. He's a very good tackler. He's physical. Like you watch him, he's a good hitter. Shades of Jabril Peppers,
Yeah.
like that kind of a player. Really good blitzer, like burst, like a lot of explosiveness, like bursting as a blitzer, and that's where some of those snaps in the D line I think come in. I wrote plays like a linebacker slash box safety, follows the quarterback's eyes, races towards the ball carrier, good instincts to read the quarterback, strong ball skills, long speed may not be elite. Need to see how he tests. Those were my notes. To me, he looks like a nickel cornerback slash safety hybrid at the next level. I think he's more safety hybrid than nickel corner. Like I said, I think Jabril Peppers is somebody that comes to mind. I think you mentioned Darnay, but I really think he's more Jabril Peppers than Darnay. I think he's a
Yeah.
lot more physical and he's a bigger guy, obviously. Um, so is he an elite athlete? No. But he plays with a hot motor. He plays all over the field. He's a weapon. He's not a complete eraser like Cooper DeJean, but like again, in today's NFL, you need guys like this. You
Yeah.
need guys that you can, even if he's not a starter, you need a guy like this on your bench that you can turn to in some package and say, get out there and do this. And he could do it, right? And I think he's a very versatile piece. This guy's not going to be drafted super high, in my opinion. I think he's probably going to go on day 3 somewhere, but
Mhm.
let me actually see where they have him graded.
I was just
Actually, they haven't
checking
graded.
that right now.
PFF
94.
has it 94. That's high. So that's right at the end of day 2.
Mhm.
But I think that's not unfair, right? For a versatile safety type in today's NFL, where you need good safeties for a lot of these things. Don't underestimate the value of these guys. Wouldn't be surprised if he fell to day 3, but like he's right in that range, like end of day 2, early day 3. Maybe he does himself some favors at the combine. Other guys who he's going to be going up against who fill similar roles are guys like Mike Sainristil at Michigan, to give an idea of like these hybrid players, eraser types. So somebody to keep an eye on. I really like this tape. Again, who's our DC? How many safeties do they need? What kind of safeties do they need? All of that is going to play a role in determining if guys like Barron are giant targets come draft day. But you have any other thoughts on Barron?
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's solidly a day 3 guy for me, but I do agree with you. He has a role on basically any team. I mean, the versatility that he brings is something that teams will covet, and he'll be whether he ends up being a starter in the NFL, he will play a good role on a defense. So, although I do think he brings a lot of value, I would be much more comfortable once we kind of get into day 3. taking a guy like him just because I don't see a ton of I don't see much of a ceiling out of him.
You know where this is the kind of where I would want to take a guy like this is if we had comp picks at the end of the third round. I mean, like this guy is like, if you got a guy like this to pick 100 on a comp pick, I'd actually be pretty pumped. Like you got your other like higher value players, the top 100, and right outside the top 100, this guy, you got him on your team as like a versatile chess piece. I would be pretty happy in that range. But if he falls further, I think it's somebody you consider. I would kind of agree with you that I don't think he's quite. I don't think he's so good that I would take him above some other players who would fit this role. But he's pretty damn good. So again, depends on like who our coordinator is. That's kind of where I land with him. I don't think he fits in any particular box. He can play a lot of defensive schemes, but the value they'll assign him will depend on who's running the defense, and a lot of questions to be answered.
Yeah, for
Anyway,
sure.
that is our 10th. That's our final prospect. That's 10 of
That's
10.
them.
That's as fast as we can do that. But that's our first 10 guys all on defense. We got about 30 more to go. Next week will be 10 on offense and then 10 more defense, I think. And we'll see, like, if we run out of prospects or we just run out of energy, we'll probably make it like 6 or 7. But we'll do the best we can here. So we still have a month to go before the Senior Bowl. We're going to try to get through these with you guys. I'm sure you'll find us, on Twitter and Spaces, wherever you like to, converse with us to go over some of these guys. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to us. Um, before we do our closing remarks, you can always find us at He's a Giant Pod. I'm Sal at Queens_guy. Monty is at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO. Please, reach out to us. You can catch us on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify. Like us, subscribe, the whole bit. That's sort of the first episode of our series and the Senior Bowl prospects. Any closing thoughts, Monty?
Yeah, just if you guys have any Senior Bowl players you want to make sure that we cover, go ahead and add us, comment on this video, DM us on Twitter, whatever it may be. We'll try to cover as much of these guys as we can. We'll be doing offense part 1 next week. So just keep a lookout for that and definitely let us know who you want to hear more about. But yeah, man, I mean, we got college football championship coming up Monday. So that'll be a big one for all of us to watch. There'll be a lot
You
of
want
NFL prospects in that.
you want to do a prediction of that game, the Michigan Washington game?
Sure, I'm down.
We haven't done predictions all year, but we might as well throw
Yeah.
one in there since it's coming to a close.
I'll go ahead and say Michigan 28, Washington 24.
Okay, so you got a real close one there. I think you're more in line with Vegas' that. I love Michael Penix Jr. I think I'm as big a fan as his as anybody. I have a hard time seeing Washington win this game. That Michigan defense, it is stout. It is loaded with
Yep.
NFL prospects. It is difficult. I think if there's anybody who can beat them, it's probably Michael Penix Jr. because he's so damn good, and those receivers are so damn good. Like they may
And
actually
that line.
stress that line. Like they may stress that Michigan defense and pose a problem for them. But listen, Alabama's line, people made a lot of fun of it in the last game, but they weren't that bad all year. They had issues, but they didn't look like that. They looked like children against that Michigan pass rush. They were
Yeah.
getting absolutely bullied. This is a tough matchup. I think Michigan wins this game. I don't think it's a one-score game. I'm gonna pick this. I'm gonna pick Michigan 30, Washington somewhere between 17 and 20 points. I know that sounds like sacrilege for a guy who loves Michael Penix and thinks the world of him, and I do. And this will not change my opinion of him. I just think this is a tough matchup. I think that Michigan defense is tough, and you expect. And again, folks, I don't expect to see JJ McCarthy come out and sling it. What I expect to see is that Michigan offensive line and Blake Corum bully the hell out of that Washington defense. I think they're going to get a steady and painful dose of that run game between Corum and Edwards over and over and over again. If they get an early lead, if they get up 2 scores quickly, like 10 points, 14 points, just expect a lot of bully ball from Michigan, And I think that's what they're going to try to do, and they're going to depend on their defense to hold down Washington. But that's a great matchup. And this has a feel to me like, do you remember? You were probably too young for this, but way back, you are too young for this. I think it was 2000 and God, what was the year? 2004 or 2005, the Texas USC game
Yeah.
Do you remember this game? The
I was
Vince Young
young,
versus
but yeah.
Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart game. I mean, it felt like Texas had no chance coming into that game. And the only thing they had to go up against that powerhouse of a team at USC was Vince Young, and he won the game. Like he single-handedly won that game for Texas. So to me, for Washington to win, this has got to be like Michael Penix Jr. is going to have to put on like some superhero type stuff to win this game. It's a tough matchup. So I'm going to pick Michigan. I think they're going to win this game in a relatively boring fashion, although I think it'll be a fun game. Um, but that's my prediction. If I'm wrong, don't hate me. I'm just a big believer. Don't be angry. And don't come at me with Michael Penix crap. I've been a fan of his long before any of you. So then I'll pound the table for him on draft day too. But that Michigan defense is very impressive. We've been following them all year. Giant season comes to a close on Sunday. Mercifully, it ends. News may break that day on coordinators and stuff, and if it does, if there's any big Giants news, I'm sure we'll probably be talking about it in some fashion, whether it's on Twitter or maybe we'll do something if it's really big news.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll
keep
see.
you guys posted. But that's kind of it. Do you have any other thoughts before we close this out, man?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing was with that game. I'm excited for it. I just the biggest thing I'm looking at here is, I'm seeing a very good, talented offense that's well coached versus a very good defense that's talented and well coached. And honestly, I think those two somewhat cancel each other out. I think those two will both get theirs. I'm excited to see Michigan's offense versus Washington's defense and seeing if JJ McCarthy can keep up with like what Michael Penix and that high octane offense can do, even with a great defense there, and what Washington can do to slow down JJ McCarthy in that run game. But I may be totally wrong, but it's going to be really interesting.
Absolutely. All right, folks. That's episode 1 of the Senior Bowl preview from He's a Giant. We appreciate all you guys. We will see you next week for episode 2. Go Giants one last time in 2023.
Go Giants.